Hello, and welcome back to Baby Elias's stories. We now return to Night Watch by Terry Pratchett. Part 8. Vimes was impressed at the way the men reacted back at the watch house, despite the lack of any command from him. Wiglet and Scuts jumped down as soon as the wagon was in the yard and dragged the gates across. Inside, Colin and Waddy pulled the shutters across the windows. Waddy went into the armory and came out with an armful of crossbows. It was all done with speed and, for the men concerned, precision. Vimes nudged his younger self. "Make the cocoa, will you, kid?" he said. "I don't want to miss the show." He sat down at his desk and put his feet up as Colin locked the door and Waddy pulled the bar across. Click, click. This is happening, he thought. But it didn't happen before. Not exactly like this. This time, the Morphic Street mob did a runner. They weren't ambushed in their meeting. There wasn't a fight. The sight of all those coppers must have scared them rigid. They weren't much, anyway. Just sloganeers and skivers and me-too-ists. Me-too-ists. The people who crowd behind the poor slob, who's the spokesman, shouting, "Yeah, right," and leg it up an alley when the law gets rough. But some had died in the ambush, and some fought back, and one thing led, as always, to another. Except this time, there was no ambush, because some thick sergeant made too much noise. Two different presents. One past, one future. I don't know what's going to happen next. However, I've got a damn good idea. "Well done, lads," he said, standing up. "You finish trapping us inside, and I'll go and tell the old man what's happening." He heard the puzzled muttering behind him as he climbed the stairs. Glug, glug, glug. Captain Tilden was sitting at his desk, staring at the wall. Vimes coughed loudly and saluted. Had a bit of, he began, and Tilden turned his ashen face to him. He looked as though he had seen a ghost, and it had been in the mirror. "You've heard the news, too, sir? The riot up at Dolly Sisters," said Tilden. "It was only a couple of hours ago." "I'm too close," Vimes thought, as the words sank in. All those things were just names. It all seemed to happen at once. Dolly Sisters, yeah, they were a right mob of hotheads up there. "The lieutenant of the day watch called in one of the regiments," said Tilden. "Which he was duly authorized to do, of course." "Which one?" said Vimes, for the look of the thing. The name was in the history books after all. "Lord Venturi's Medium Dragoons, Sergeant. My old regiment." "That's right," thought Vimes. "And cavalry are highly trained at civilian crowd control. Everyone knows that." "And, there were some, accidental deaths." Vimes felt sorry for the man. In truth, it was never proved that anyone was given an order to ride people down. But did it matter? Horses pushing and people unable to get away because of the press of people behind them. It was too easy for small children to lose grip of a hand. "But, in fairness, missiles were thrown at the officers and one soldier was badly injured," said Tilden, as if reading the words off a card. "That's all right then," Vimes thought. "What kind of missiles, sir?" "Fruit, I gather. Although there may have been some stones as well." Vimes realized that Tilden's hand was shaking. "The riot was over the price of bread, I understand." "No, The protest was over the price of bread, said Vimes' inner voice. The riot was what happens when you have panicking people trapped between idiots on horseback and other idiots shouting, "Yeah, right!" and trying to push forward, and the whole thing in the charge of a fool advised by a maniac with a steel rule. The feeling of the palace, said Tilden slowly, is that revolutionary elements may attack the watch houses. Really, sir? Why? It's the sort of thing they do, said Tilden. As a matter of fact, sir, the men are putting up shutters and do whatever you feel necessary, Sergeant, said Tilden, waving a hand with a scrawled letter in it. We are told we must be mindful of the curfew regulations. That has been underlined. Vimes paused before answering. He'd bitten back the first answer. He contented himself with, "Very well, sir," and left. The man wasn't a bad man, he knew. He must have been badly affected by the news to give such a stupid, dangerous order. Do what you feel necessary. Give an order like that to a man who's liable to panic when he sees a bunch of people waving their fists, and you got the Dolly Sisters massacre. He walked back down the stairs. The squad was standing around looking nervous. "Prisoner in the cells," said Vimes. Corporal Cullen nodded. "Yes, sir. Sarge. Snouty says they're up at Dolly Sisters." "I know. Now here's what I feel is necessary. Take the shutters down, unbar the door, leave it open and light all the lamps." "Why isn't the blue lamp over the door lit?" "Dunno, Sarge. But what if—" "Get it lit, Corporal. And then you and Wadey go and stand guard outside, where you can be seen. You're friendly-looking local lads. Take your bells, but, and I want to make this very clear, no swords, right?" "No swords?" Cullen burst out. "But what if a bloody great mob comes round the corner and I'm not armed?" Vimes reached him in 2 swift strides and stood nose to nose. "And if you have got a sword, what will they do, eh? Against the bloody great mob? What do you want them to see?" "Now, what I want them to see is Fatty Cullen. Decent lad, not too bright. I knew his dad. And there's old Wadey. He drinks in my pub, 'cause if they just see a couple of men in uniform with swords, you'll be in trouble. And if you draw those swords, you'll be in real trouble. And if by any chance, Corporal, you draw swords tonight without my order and survive, then you'll wish you hadn't done either, because you'll have to face me, see? And then you'll know what trouble is. 'Cause everything up until then will look like a bleeding day at the sodden seaside. Understand?" Fred Cullen goggled at him. There was no other word for it. "Don't let my sugary sweet tones lead you to believe that I'm not damn well giving you orders," said Vimes, turning away. "Vimes?" "Yes, Sarge," said young Sam. "Have we got a saw in this place?" Snouty stepped forward. "I got a toolbox, Sarge." "Nails too?" "Yes, sir." "Right, rip the door off my locker and hammer a lot of nails right through it, will you? Then lay it down on the upstairs landing, points up. I'll take the saw, 'cause I'm going to the privy." After the silence that followed, Corporal Cullen obviously felt he had to make a contribution. He cleared his throat and said, "If you've got a problem in that area, Sarge, Mrs. Cullen's got a wonderful medicine, she." "I won't be long," said Vimes. In fact, he was 4 minutes. "All done," he said, returning to the sound of hammering, from the locker room. Come with me, Lance Constable. Time for a lesson in interrogation. Oh, and bring the toolbox. Fred and Wadey don't like being outside, said Sam as they went down the stone steps. They say, what if that bunch of unmentionables turn up? They needn't worry. Our friends at Cable Street are not front door kind of people. He pushed open the door to the cells. The prisoner stood up and grabbed the bars. Okay, they've come. Now you let me out, he said. Come on, and I'll put in a good word for you. No one's come for you, sir, said Vimes. He locked the main door behind him, click, and then unlocked the cell. Block. It's probably a busy time for them, he added. Been a bit of a riot over in Dolly Sisters. A few deaths. Might be a while before they get around to you. The man eyed the toolbox that the Lance Constable was holding. It was only a flicker, but Vimes saw the moment of uncertainty. I get it, said the prisoner. Good cop, bad cop, eh? If you like, said Vimes. But we're a bit short-staffed, so if I give you a cigarette, would you mind kicking yourself in the teeth? Look, this is a game, right? Said the prisoner. You know, I'm one of the particulars, and you're new in town and want to impress us. Well, you have. Big laugh all round. Anyway, I was only on stakeout. Yes, but that's not how it works, is it? Said Vimes. Now we've got you. We can decide what you're guilty of. You know how it's done. Fancy a ginger beer? The man's face froze. You know, said Vimes, it turns out that after the riot this evening, we've been warned to expect revolutionary attacks on the watchhouses. Now, personally, I wouldn't expect that. What I'd expect is a bunch of ordinary people turning up, you know, because they've heard what happened. But, and you can call me Mr. Suspicious if you like, I've got a feeling that there will be something a bit worse. You see, apparently we've got to be mindful of the curfew regulations. What that means, I suppose, is that if we get people coming to complain about unarmed citizens being attacked by soldiers, which personally I would consider to be assault with a deadly weapon, we've got to arrest them. I find that rather... There was a commotion from above. Vimes nodded to young Sam, who disappeared up the stairs. Now that my impressionable assistant has gone, said Vimes quietly, I'll add if any of my men get hurt tonight. Then I'll see to it that for the rest of your life you scream at the sight of a bottle. I haven't done anything to you. You don't even know me. Yes, like I said, we're doing it your way, said Vimes. Sam reappeared in a hurry. Someone's fallen in the privy, he announced. They were climbing on the roof and it had been sawn through and gave way. It must be one of those revolutionary elements, said Vimes, watching the prisoner's face. We've been warned about them. He says he's from Cable Street, Sarge. That's just the kind of thing I'd say if I was a revolutionary element, said Vimes. All right, let's take a look at him. Upstairs, the front door was still open. There were a few people outside, just visible in the lamplight. There was also Sergeant Knock inside, and he was not happy. Who said we open up like this? He was saying. It looks nasty out on those streets. Very dangerous. I said we stay open, said Vimes, coming up the stairs. Is there a problem, Sergeant? Well, look, Sarge. I heard on the way over they're throwing stones at the Dimwell Street house, said Knock, deflating. There's people in the streets. Mobs. I hate to think what's happening downtown. So, We're coppers. We should be getting prepared. What? To bar the doors and listen to the stones rattle off the roof? Said Vimes. Or maybe we should go out and arrest everyone. Any volunteers? No? I'll tell you what, Sergeant. If you want to do some coppering, you can go and arrest the man in the privy. Do him for breaking and entering. There was a scream from upstairs. Vimes glanced up. And I reckon if you go up onto the attic landing, you'll find there's a man who dropped through the skylight right onto a door full of nails that was accidentally left there, he went on. He looked at Knock's puzzled face. It's the Cable Street boys, Sergeant, he said. They thought they could come across the roofs and scare the dumb brown jobs, chuck 'em both in the cells. You're arresting unmentionables. No uniform, no badge, carrying weapons. Let's have a bit of law around here, shall we? Said Vimes. Snouty, where's that cocoa? We'll get into trouble! Knock shouted. Vimes let Knock wait until he'd lit a cigar. We're in trouble anyway, Winsborough, he said, shaking out the match. It's just a case of deciding what kind we want. Thanks, Snouty. He took the mug of cocoa from the jailer and nodded at Sam. Let's take a stroll outside, he said. He was aware of the sudden silence in the room, except for the whimpering coming from upstairs and the distant yelling from the privy. What are you all standing around for, gentlemen? He said. Want to ring your bells? Anyone fancy shouting out that all's well? With those words hanging in the room, all big and pink, Vimes stepped out into the evening air. There were people hanging around out there in little groups of 3 or 4, talking among themselves and occasionally turning to look at the watchhouse. Vimes sat down on the steps and took a sip of his cocoa. He might as well have dropped his breeches. The groups opened up, became an audience. No man drinking a non-alcoholic chocolate beverage had ever been the center of so much attention. He'd been right. A closed door is an incitement to bravery. A man drinking from a mug under a light and apparently enjoying the cool night air is an incitement to pause. We're breaking curfew, you know, said a young man with a quick dart forward, dart back movement. Is that right? Said Vimes. Are you going to arrest us then? Not me, said Vimes cheerfully. I'm on my break. Yeah? Said the man. He pointed to Cullen and Wadey. They on their break too? They are now. Vimes half turned. Bruise up, lads. Off you go. No need to run. There's enough for everyone. And come back out when you've got it. When the sound of pounding boots had died away, Vimes turned back and smiled at the group again. So, when do you come off your break? Said the man. Vimes paid him some extra attention. The stance was a giveaway. He was ready to fight, even though he didn't look like a fighter. If this were a bar room, the bartenders would be taking the more expensive bottles off the shelf, because amateurs like that tended to spread the glass around. Ah, yes, and now he could see why the word bar room had occurred to him. There was a bottle sticking out of the man's pocket. He'd been drinking his defiance. Oh, round Thursday, I reckon, said Vimes, eyeing the bottle. There was laughter from somewhere in the growing crowd. Why Thursday? Said the drinker. Got my day off on Thursday. There were a few more laughs this time. When the tension is drawing out, it doesn't take much to snap it. I demand you arrest me, said the drinker. Come on, try it. You're not drunk enough, said Vimes. "I should go home and sleep it off if I was you." The man's hand grasped the neck of the bottle. "Here it comes," thought Vimes. By the look of him, the man had one chance in 5. Fortunately, the crowd wasn't too big yet. What you didn't need at a time like this was people at the back, craning to see and asking what was going on, and the lit-up watch house was fully illuminating the lit-up man. "Friend, if you take my advice, you'll not consider that," said Vimes. He took another sip of his cocoa. It was only lukewarm now, but along with the cigar it meant that both his hands were occupied. That was important. He wasn't holding a weapon. No one could say afterwards that he had a weapon. "I'm no friend to you people!" snapped the man and smashed the bottle on the wall by the steps. The glass tinkled to the ground. Clink, 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 clink. Vimes watched the man's face, watched the expression change from drink-fueled anger to agonizing pain, watched the mouth open. The man swayed. Blood began to ooze from between his fingers, and a low, thin animal sound escaped from between his teeth. That was the tableau under the light. Vimes sitting down with his hands full, the bleeding man several feet away. No fight. No one had touched anyone. He knew the way rumor worked, and he wanted this picture to fix itself in people's minds. There was even ash still on the cigar. He stayed very still for a few seconds and then stood up all concerned. "Come on, one of you help me, will you?" he said, tugging off his breastplate and the chainmail shirt underneath it. He grabbed his shirt sleeve and tore off a long strip. A couple of men jerked into action by the voice of command, steadied the man who was dripping blood. One of them reached for the hand. "Leave it," Vimes commanded, tightening the strip of sleeve around the man's unresisting wrist. "He's got a handful of broken glass. Lay him down as gently as you can before he falls over, but don't touch nothing until I've got this tourniquet on. Sam, go into the stable and pinch Marilyn's blanket for the boy. Anyone here know Dr. Lon? Speak up!" Someone among the awed bystanders volunteered that they did and was sent running for him. Vimes was aware of the circle watching him. A lot of the watchmen were peering around the doorway now. "Saw this happen once," he said aloud, and added mentally, "in 10 years' time. It was in a bar fight. Man grabbed a bottle, didn't know how to smash it, ended up with a handful of shards, and the other guy reached down and squeezed." There was a satisfying groan from the crowd. "Oh. Anyone know who this man is?" he added. "Come on, someone must." A voice in the crowd volunteered that the man could well be Joss Gappy, an apprentice shoemaker from New Cobblers. "Let's hope we can save his hand then," said Vimes. "I need a new pair of boots." It wasn't funny at all, but it got another of those laughs, the ones people laugh out of sheer fright and nervousness. Then the crowd parted as Lon came through. "Ah," he said, kneeling down by Gappy. "You know, I don't know why I own a bed. Trainee bottle fighter? Yes. Looks like you've done the right things, but I need light and a table," said Lon. "Can your men take him into the watch house?" Vimes had hoped it wouldn't come to that. Oh well, you had to make the best of it. He pointed randomly at figures in the crowd. "You, and you, and you, and you, and you too, lady," he said. "You can help Fred and Wadey take this young man inside, okay? And you're to stop with him, and we'll leave the doors open, right? All you lot out here will know what's going on. We've got no secrets here. Everyone understand?" "Yeah, but you're a copper," a voice began. Vimes darted forward and hauled a frightened young man out of the crowd by his shirt. "Yeah, I am," he said. "And see that lad over there? He's a copper too. His name's Sam Vimes. He lives in Corkbill Street with his mum. And that's Fred Cullen. Just got married. Got a couple of rooms in Old Cobblers. In Exhibit C, there is Wadey. Everyone round here knows Wadey. Billy Wiglet there. He was born in these streets. Have I asked you your name? No, the man mumbled. That's 'cause I don't care who you are, said Vimes, letting the man go and looking round at the crowd. Listen to me, all of you. My name's John Keel. No one gets taken into this watch house without me knowing why. You're all here as witnesses. Those of you I pointed out, you come on inside to see fair play all round. Do the rest of you want to hang around to see what happens to Gappy? Fine, I'll get Snouty to bring you out some cocoa. Or you can go home. It's a cold night. You ought to be in your beds. I know I'd like to be in mine. And yes, we know about Dolly Sisters, and we don't like it any more than you do. And we've heard about Dimwell Street, and we don't like that either. And that's all I've got to say tonight. Now, anyone who still wants to take a swing at a copper can step right up if they want to. I've got my uniform off. We'll have a go, here and now, fair and square, in front of everyone. Anyone? Something brushed his shoulder and clattered on the watch house steps. Then there was the sound of slipping tiles from a roof on the other side, and a man fell off the roof and into the pool of light. There were gasps from the crowd, and one or two short screams. Looks like you got a volunteer, said someone. There was the horrible nervous sniggering again. The crowd parted to let Vimes view the sudden arrival. The man was dead. If he hadn't been when he fell off the roof, he was after he'd hit the ground, because no neck normally looked like that. A crossbow had fallen down with him. Vimes remembered the draught across his shoulder and went back to the watchhouse steps. It didn't take long to find the arrow, which had broken into several pieces. Anyone know this man? He said. The crowd, even those members of it who hadn't been able to get a good look at the fallen bowman, indicated definite ignorance. Vimes went through the man's pockets. Every single one was empty, which was all the evidence of identification he needed. Looks like it's going to be a long night, he said, signaling Cullen to take this body inside too. I've got to get on with my work, ladies and gentlemen. If anyone wants to stay, and frankly, I'd be obliged if you do, I'll send some lads out to build a fire. Thank you for your patience. He picked up his mail and breastplate and went back inside. What are they doing? He said to Sam without turning round. Some of them are wandering off, but most of them are standing around, Sarge, said Sam, peering around the door. Sarge, one of them shot at you. Really? Who says the man on the roof was one of them? That's an expensive bow, and he didn't have anything in his pockets. Nothing. Not so much as a used hanky. Very odd, Sarge, said Sam loyally. Especially since I was expecting a piece of paper saying something like, I am definitely a member of a revolutionary cadre. Trust me on this, said Vimes, looking carefully at the corpse. Yes, that'd tell us he was a revolutionary all right, said Sam. Vimes sighed and stared at the wall at a moment. Then he said, anyone notice anything about his bow? It's the new Bolsover A7, said Fred Cullen. Not a bad bow, Sarge. Not an assassin's weapon, though. That's true, said Vimes, and twisted the dead man's head so they could see the tip of the little metal dart behind the ear. But this is... Fred, You know everyone. Where can I get some ginger beer at this time of night?" "Ginger beer, Sarge?" "Yes, Fred." "Why do—" Cullen began. "Don't ask, Fred. Just get half a dozen bottles, all right?" Vimes turned to the desk, on which, surrounded by a fascinated crowd, Dr. Lorne was at work on the stricken Gappy. "How's it going?" said Vimes, pushing through. "Slower than it'd go if people got out of the damn light," said Lorne, carefully moving his tweezers to a mug by Gappy's hand and dropping a bloody fragment of glass therein. "I've seen worse on a Friday night. He'll keep the use of his fingers, if that's what you want to know. He just won't be making any shoes for a while. Well done." There was a general crowd approval. Vimes looked around at the people and the coppers. There were one or two muted conversations going on. He heard phrases like "bad business" and "they say that" above the general noise. He'd played the cards well enough. Most of the lads here lived within a street or two. It was one thing to have a go at faceless bastards in uniform, but quite another to throw stones at old Fred Cullen, or old Wadey, or old Billy Wiglet, who you'd known since you were 2 years old and played dead rat conkers with in the gutter. Lorne put the tweezers down and pinched the bridge of his nose. "That's it," he said wearily. "A bit of stitching and he'll be fine." "And there's some others I need you to take a look at," said Vimes. "You know that comes as no surprise," said the doctor. "One's got a lot of holes in his feet. One dropped through the privy roof and has got a twisted leg. And one's dead." "I don't think I can do much about the dead one," said the doctor. "How do you know he's dead? I realise that I may regret asking that question." "He's got a broken neck from falling off a roof, and I reckon he fell off because he got a steel crossbow bolt in his brain." "Ah, that sounds like dead, if you want my medical opinion. Did you do it?" "No." "Well, you're a busy man, Sergeant. You can't be everywhere." The doctor's face cracked into a grin when he saw Vimes go red, and he walked over to the corpse. "Yes, I'd say that life is definitely extinct," he said. "And I want you to write that down, please, on paper, with official sounding words like contusion and abrasions. I want you to write that down. And I want you to write down what time you found he was dead. And then, if you don't mind, 2 lads will take you down to look at the other 2. And after you've treated them, thank you, I'd like you to sign another piece of paper saying you did and I called you in. 2 copies of everything, please." "All right. Dare I ask why?" "I don't want anyone to say I did it." "Why should anyone say that? You told me he fell off a roof." "These are suspicious times, Doctor. Ah, here's Fred. Any luck?" Corporal Cullen was carrying a box. He put it down on his desk with a grunt. "Old Mrs. Arbiter didn't like being knocked up in the middle of the night," he announced. "I had to give her $1. Vimes didn't dare look at Lorne's face. "Really?" he said, as innocently as possible. "And you got the ginger beer?" "6 pints of her best stuff," said Cullen. "There's 3 pence back on the bottles, by the way. And, he shuffled uneasily. I heard they set fire to the watch house at Dolly Sisters, Sarge. It's very bad up at Knapp Hill too. And, the Chitling Street house got all its windows broke. And up at the Leastgate house, some of the lads went out to stop kids throwing stones and, one of them drew his sword, Sarge. And he'll probably live, Sarge." Dr. Lorne looked about him at the crowded office, where people were still talking. Snouty was going round with a tray of cocoa. Out in the street, some of the watchmen were standing around a makeshift fire with the remnant of the crowd. "Well, I must say I'm impressed," he said. "Sounds like you're the only watch house not under siege tonight. I don't want to know how you did it." "Luck played a part," said Vimes, "and I've got 3 men who carry no personal identification whatsoever in the cells, and another anonymous would-be assassin who has been assassinated." "Quite a problem," said Lon. "Now I just have to deal with simple mysteries like what the rash means." "I intend to solve mine quite quickly," said Vimes. The assassin moved quietly from roof to roof until he was well away from the excitement around the watch house. His movements could be called cat-like, except that he did not stop to spray urine up against things. Eventually, he reached one of the upper world's many hidden places, where several thickets of chimneys made a little sheltered space, invisible from the ground and from most of the surrounding roofscape. He didn't enter it immediately, but circled it for a while, moving with absolute silence from one vantage point to another. What would have intrigued a watcher who knew the ways of Ankh-Morpork's guild of assassins was how invisible this one was. When he moved, you saw movement. When he stopped, he wasn't there. Magic would have been suspected, and in an oblique way, the watcher would have been right. 90% of most magic merely consists of knowing one extra fact. At least the figure appeared satisfied and dropped into the space. He picked up a bag from its nesting place between the smoking pots, and there was some faint swishing and heavier breathing that suggested clothes were being changed. After a minute or so, he emerged from the hidden niche, and now, somehow, he was visible. Hard to see, yes, one shadow among others, but nevertheless there, in a way that he had not been before, when he'd been as visible as the breeze. He dropped lightly onto a lean-to roof, and thence to the ground, where he stepped into a handy shadow. Then there was a further transformation. It was done quite easily. The evil little crossbow was disassembled and slipped into the pockets of a clink-free velvet bag. The soft leather slippers were exchanged for a pair of heavier boots that had been stashed in the shadow, and the black hood was pushed back. He walked lightly around the corner and waited a few minutes. A coach came along, its torches trailing flame. It showed briefly, and its door opened and shut. The assassin settled back in his seat as the coach picked up speed again. There was a very faint lamp in the carriage. Its glow revealed a female figure relaxing in the shadows opposite. As the coach passed the torch, there was a suggestion of lilac silk. You've missed a bit," said the figure. It produced a lilac-coloured handkerchief and held it in front of the young man's face. "Spit," came the command. Reluctantly, he did so. A hand wiped his cheek and then held the cloth up to the light. "Dark green," said the woman. "How strange, I understand, Havelock, that you scored 0 in your examination for stealthily movement." "May I ask how you found that out, madam?" "Oh, one hears things," Madam said lightly. "One just has to hold money up to one's ear." "Well, it was true," said the assassin. "And why was this?" "The examiner thought I'd used trickery, madam." "And did you?" Of course, I thought that was the idea. And you never attended his lessons, he said. Oh, I did, religiously. He says he never saw you at any of them. Havelock smiled. And your point, madam, is? Madam laughed. Will you take some champagne? There was the sound of a bottle moving in an ice bucket. Thank you, madam, but no. As you wish, I shall. And now, report, please. I can't believe what I saw. I thought he was a thug, and he is a thug. You can see his muscles thinking for him, but he overrules them moment by moment. I think I saw a genius at work, but what? He's just a sergeant, madam. Don't underestimate him on that account. It is a very useful rank for the right man. The optimum balance of power and responsibility. Incidentally, they say he can read the street through the sole of his boots and keeps them very thin for that purpose. There are plenty of different surfaces, that's true, but you're always so solemn about these things. He ceased to complicate. The rattling of the coach underlined the silence this remark caused. It was moving through a richer part of the city now, where there was more light, and the curfew, being for poorer people, was less rigorously observed. The figure opposite the assassin stroked the cat on her lap. No, he'll serve some purpose, said Madam. Everyone is telling me about Kiel. In a world where we all move in curves, he proceeds in a straight line, and going straight in a world of curves makes things happen. She stroked the cat. It yowled softly. It was ginger and had an expression of astonishing smugness, although periodically it scratched at its collar. On a different subject, she said. What was that business with the book? I did not like to take too much notice. Oh, it was an extremely rare volume I was able to track down on the nature of concealment. That stupid hulk of a boy burned it. Yes, that was a piece of luck. I was afraid he might try to read it, although, Havelock smiled wanly, someone would have had to help him with the longer words. Was it valuable? Priceless, especially now it has been destroyed. It contained information of value, possibly involving the color dark green. Will you tell me? I could tell you, Havelock smiled again, but then I would have to find someone to pay me to kill you. Then don't tell me. But I do think Dog Botherer is an unpleasant nickname. When your name is veterinary, madam, you're happy enough if it's merely Dog Botherer. Can you drop me off a little way from the guild, please? I'll go in via the roof. I have a tiger to attend to before I go up to, you know. A tiger? How exciting. She stroked the cat again. You found your way in yet? Veterinary shrugged. I've known my way for years, madam. But now he has half a regiment around the palace. 4 or 5 guards on each door, with irregular patrols and spot checks. I can't get through them. Only let me get inside, please, and the men there are no problem. The cat pawed at its collar. Is it possible that he is allergic to diamonds? Said Madam. She held up the cat. Is oo allergic to diamonds then? Havelock sighed, but inwardly, because he respected his aunt. He just wished she was a bit more sensible about cats. He felt instinctively that if you were going to fondle a cat while discussing matters of intrigue, then it should be a long-haired white one. It shouldn't be an elderly street tom with irregular bouts of flatulence. What about the sergeant? He said, shifting along the seat as politely as possible. The lady all in lilac lowered the cat gently onto the seat. There was a distressing smell. "I think I should meet Mr. Keel as soon as possible," she said. "Perhaps he can be harnessed. The party is tomorrow night. Do you mind opening the window?" A little later that night, Downey was walking unsteadily back to his study after a convivial time in the prefect's common room when he noticed that a torch had gone out. With a swiftness that might have surprised someone who saw no further than his flushed face and unsteady walk, he pulled out a dagger and scanned the corridor. He glanced up at the ceiling too. There were grey shadows everywhere, but nothing more than that. Sometimes torches did go out all by themselves. He stepped forward. When he woke up in his bed next morning, he put the headache down to some bad brandy, and some skag had painted orange and black stripes on his face. It started to rain again. Vimes liked the rain. Street crime went down when it rained. People stayed indoors. Some of the best nights of his career had been rainy. When he'd stood in the shadows in the lee of some building, head tucked in so that there was barely anything showing between his helmet and his collar, and listened to the silvery rustle of the rain. Once he'd been standing so quietly, so withdrawn, so not there, that a fleeing robber who'd evaded his pursuers had leaned against him to catch his breath. And when Vimes put his arms around him and whispered, "Gotcha," into his ear, the man had apparently done in his trousers what his dear mother, some 40 years before, had very patiently taught him not to do. The people had gone home. The sewn-up Gappy had been escorted to New Cobblers, where Fred Cullen had patiently explained events to the man's parents, with his round red face radiating honesty. Lorne was possibly getting some use out of his bed. And the rain gurgled in the downpipes and gushed from the gargoyles and swirled in the gutters and deadened all sound. Useful stuff, rain. Vimes picked up the bottle of Mrs. Arbiter's best ginger beer. He remembered it. It was as gassy as hell and therefore hugely popular. A young boy could, with encouragement and training, eventually managed to belch the whole first verse of the national anthem after just one swig. This is an important social attribute when you're 8 years old. He'd chosen Colin and Waddy for this task. He wasn't going to involve young Sam. It wasn't that what he was planning was illegal as such. It was just that it had the same colour and smell as something illegal, and Vimes didn't want to have to explain. The cells were old, much older than the building above them. The iron cages were fairly new and didn't take up all the space. There were other cellars beyond an arch, containing nothing more than rats and rubbish, but importantly, they couldn't be seen from the cages. Vimes got the men to carry the dead bowman through. Nothing wrong with that. It was the middle of the night, filthy weather. No sense in waking up the people at the mortuary when there was a nice cold cellar. He watched through the spy hole in the door as the body was taken past the cells. It caused a certain stir, especially in the first man he'd brought in. The other two had the look of men who'd seen a lot of bad stuff in the name of making money. If they were hired to steal or murder or be a copper, it was all the same to them, and they'd learned not to react too readily to deaths that were not their own. The first man, though, was getting nervous. Vimes had nicknamed him Ferret. He was the best dressed of the three, all in black. The dagger had been expensive, and Vimes had noticed he had a silver death's head ring on one finger. The other two had dressed nondescript, and their weapons had been workmanlike. Nothing much to look at, but well used. No real assassin would wear jewelry at work. It was dangerous, and it shone. But Ferret wanted to be a big man. He probably checked himself in the mirror before he went out to make sure he looked cool. He was the sort of little twerp that got a kick out of showing his dagger to women in bars. Ferret, in short, had big dreams. Ferret had an imagination. Well, that was fine. The watchman returned and picked up the packages Vimes had prepared. "Remember, we do it fast," he said. "They're worried, they're tired. No one's come for them, and they've just seen a very dead colleague. We don't want to give the first two time to think. Understand?" They nodded. "And we leave the little one until last. I want him to have lots of time." Ferret was considering his prospects. Regrettably, this didn't take long. He'd already had a row with the other two. Some rescue team they'd been. They weren't even dressed right, but the brown jobs hadn't done things as per spec. Everyone knew they backed away. They weren't supposed to fight back or show any kind of intelligence. The main cell door was flung back. Clang! "It's ginger beer time!" roared someone, and a watchman ran through with a box of bottles and disappeared into the rooms beyond. There wasn't much light in here. Ferret cowered against the wall and saw two watchmen unlock the cell next door. Clink, clink! Drag the shackled occupant upright and out into the cellar, and then hustle him around the corner. The voices had a slight echo. "Hold him down! Mind his legs! Right, let's have the bottle. Give it a proper shake, otherwise it won't work." "Okay, friend. Anything you want to tell us? Your name? No? Well, it's like this. Right now, we don't care a whole lot if you talk or not." There was a loud pop, pop, and a hiss, and then a scream. Ah! An explosion of agony. Ah! After it had died away, the trembling Ferret heard someone say, "Quick, get the next one before the captain catches us!" He cringed back as two watchmen rushed into the next cell, dragged out the struggling prisoner, and hustled him into the darkness. "All right, one chance. Are you going to talk? Yes? No? Too late!" Once again the pop. Boop. Once again the hiss. Hiss. Once again the scream. It was louder and longer this time, and ended in a kind of bubbling sound. Ferret crouched against the wall, fingers in his mouth. Around the corner, sitting in the light of one lantern, Colin nudged Vimes, wrinkled his nose and pointed down. There was a gully that ran between all the cells, as a primitive sop to hygiene. Now a thin trickle was inching its way along. Ferret was nervous. "Gotcha," thought Vimes. But a good imagination needs a little more time. He leaned forward, and the other two moved closer, expectantly. "So," he said in a low whisper, "have you boys had your holidays yet?" After a few minutes of very small talk, he stood up, strode round to the last occupied cell, unlocked the door, and grabbed Ferret, who was trying to squeeze into a corner. "No! Please! I'll tell you whatever you want to know!" the man yelled. "Really?" said Vimes. "What's the orbital velocity of the moon?" "What?" Oh, you'd like something simpler? Said Vimes, dragging the man out of the cell. Fred! Waity! He wants to talk. Bring a notebook. It took half an hour. Fred Cullen wasn't a fast writer, and when the painful sound of his efforts concluded with the stab of his last full stop, Vimes said, Okay, sir. And now you write down at the end, I, Gerald Leastways, currently staying at the Young Men's Pagan Association, am making this statement of my own free will and not under duress. And then you sign it, or else. Got it? Yes, sir. The initials GL had been inscribed on the dagger. Vimes believed them. He'd met plenty of Leastwayses in his career, and they tended to spill their guts at the mere thought of spilling their guts. And when they did, you got everything. Anyone who had seen the ginger beer trick used on someone else would confess to anything. Well now, he said cheerfully, standing up. Thank you for your cooperation. Want a lift to Cable Street? Ferret's expression, if not his mouth, said, Huh? We've got to drop off your friends, said Vimes. We've got to drop off your friends, Vimes went on, raising his voice slightly. Todsey and Muffer. We'll drop the dead one off at the mortuary. Just a bit of paperwork for you. He nodded at Cullen. One copy of your helpful statement, one certificate of death from the pox doctor for the late mystery man, and rest assured we'll try to track down his murderer. A chitty from Mossy about the ointment he put on Muffer's feet. Oh, and a receipt for 6 bottles of ginger beer. He put a hand on Ferret's shoulder and gently walked him round into the next cellar, where Todsey and Muffer were sitting, gagged, bound, and livid with rage. On a table nearby was a box containing 6 flagons of ginger beer. The corks were heavily wired down. Ferret stared at Vimes, who inserted a finger in his mouth, blew up his cheeks, and flicked at the finger with a loud pop. Pop! Waddy hissed between his teeth. Shh! Fred Cullen opened his mouth, but Vimes clamped his hand over it. No, don't, he said. Funny thing, Gerald, but Fred here just screams out loud at times for no reason at all. You tricked me! Ferret wailed. Vimes patted him on the shoulder. Tricked, he growled. How so, Gerald? You made me think you were doing the ginger beer trick. Ginger beer trick? Said Vimes, his brow wrinkling. What's that? You know! You brought the stuff down here! We don't drink alcohol on duty, Gerald, said Vimes severely. What's wrong with a little ginger beer? We don't know any tricks with this stuff, Gerald. What tricks do you know? Seen any good tricks lately, Gerald? Do tell. At last it dawned on Ferret that he should stop talking. It was about half an hour too late. The expressions on what could be seen of the faces of Todsey and Muffer suggested that they wanted a very personal word with him. I demand protective custody, he managed. Just when I'm letting you go, Gerald, said Vimes. As you said in your statement, what was it, Fred? Something about just obeying orders. All that stuff about mixing with the mobs and throwing things at coppers and soldiers. You didn't want to do that, I know. You didn't like being round in Cable Street, watching people being beaten up and being told what to confess to, because it's plain to me that you're not that sort. You're small fry, I understand that. I say we call it quits. How about you? Please, I'll tell you all I know, Ferret squeaked. You mean you haven't? Vimes roared. He spun round and grabbed a bottle. Yes! No! I mean, if I sit quiet, I'm sure I'll remember some more. Vimes held his gaze for a moment and then dropped the bottle back in the crate. Clunk. All right, he said. It'll be $1 a day. Meals extra. Right you are, sir. Vimes watched Ferret scuttle back into a cell and shut the door behind him. Clang! Then he turned to Fred and Waddy. Go and wake up Marilyn, he said. Let's deliver the other 3. The rain was falling steadily and a thin mist filled Cable Street. The wagon came out of nowhere. Fred had urged Marilyn into something approaching a canter down the street, and when the horse came around the corner, she was trying to keep ahead of the heavy, rumbling cart behind. As the hurry-up wagon passed the station, the rear door was flung open, and 2 bodies were tumbled out onto the wet cobbles. The guards rushed forward. 1 or 2 of them fired after the retreating cart, but the arrows clattered harmlessly off the black iron strips. The other men approached the tied-up bodies with some care. There were groans, punctuated by swear words, and pinned to one man some paperwork. They read the note. They did not laugh. Vimes unharnessed the old horse, rubbed her down, and checked on her feed. Perhaps it was his imagination, but the feed bins seemed fuller than they had been. Guilty consciences were at work, maybe. Then he walked out into the cool night air. The lights were on in the watch house. It was a beacon, now that the street lamps had been doused. Beyond the walls of the yard, the real night had closed in. The old night with its tendrils of fog and crawling shadows. He relaxed and wore it like an overcoat. A shadow near the gate was deeper than it ought to be. He felt for his cigar case again, cursed, and pulled a cigar out of his shirt sleeve. He cupped his hands when he lit it, but kept his eyes tight shut to hold the night vision. Then he looked up and blew a smoke ring. Yes, everyone thought black didn't show up at night. They were wrong. He walked over to shut the gate and then pulled out his sword in one fluid movement. Shing! Sadie raised her head, revealing a pale oval of a face in the depths of her bonnet. Good morning, kind sir, she said. Good morning, Sadie, said Vimes wearily. To what do I owe this pleasure? Madam wants to see you, kind sir. If you mean Rosie, I've been a bit busy. Dotsy's handbag hit him on the back of the head. Bong! Madam doesn't like waiting, dearie, were the last words he heard before night closed in all the way.